Let's go ahead and send it out now to Files One's Christy Duffy. Christy has been in the courtroom since day one and following this trial from the beginning. Christy, what do you have for us?
Well, after about 13 hours of deliberations, the verdict came just before lunch today on Friday, Mike. And if you look at it, there are 15 counts that the jury had to get through. And if you divide it up, you could say that the jury spent less than 1 hour on each of those 15 counts over the course of 3 days of being in the deliberation room. Now, 20-year-old defendant Darun Ravi was found guilty of the invasion of privacy, as Andrew said, of bias on some respects, of hindering his own apprehension, and of witness tampering. He sat stone-faced in the courtroom today at the defense table and listening to the jury as they found him guilty on much of these counts. Now, we heard over 12 days of testimony in this case. We heard from over 20 witnesses, including many of the students who lived in the dorm building where this all took place. We also heard from the resident advisor in that Rutgers dorm building, Tyler Clementi, the victim in this case, Darun Ravi's roommate. He went to the resident advisor and filed a report when he found out this was going on. However, he did commit suicide several days after finding out that he was spied on in their shared dorm room while he was having sex with another man who we know only as MB, the second victim in this case. Now, witnesses testified they turned on this webcam, a window into the private dorm room, and saw for seconds Tyler Clementi kissing another man. In one instance, they had their shirts off, and then 18-year-old, well, at the time, 18-year-old Darun Ravi was posting messages to Twitter, texting his friends, IMing his friends, and this was all evidence we saw in this case, encouraging them, if you will, to tune into his webcam and watch what was going on in private in his dorm room between Tyler Clementi and his guest, MB. Now, the prosecutor says that Darun Ravi targeted Tyler Clementi in this way because he was gay, and the jury did agree with some parts of that, as Andrew did point out. Darun Ravi will now have to be sentenced, and here's a listen in. I did an interview with a criminal defense attorney who represents a lot of Rutgers students in the area, and here's what he thinks, his reaction, and what he thinks will happen when it comes down to the sentencing. Listen in. What was your general reaction finding out that he was found guilty on most of the counts, including the bias intimidation?
I was surprised about the bias intimidation. I thought that was a difficult count for the state to prove, and you're really trying to figure out what was in Tyler Clementi's head, and I don't think that was a count that really the jury should have found him guilty of. So I was surprised at the bias intimidation count.
How will this case, especially because he has been, he is guilty on most of the counts, how is this case really, shifting the bar, if you will, really, changing things in terms of, like, historically in the courts in New Jersey? How will this change things going forward?
Well, I think prosecutors are going to use the bias intimidation statute a lot more if there's a fact pattern that they think they should. But it's a possibility that the legislature might look at the statute and say there were some issues in regard to the statute because the statute now came to the forefront, and the legislature possibly could change the statute and make it a little bit more easier to understand. So I think that could be an issue going forward.
And moving off of that, do you think that sets up any grounds for an appeal, or can you talk about what you think will happen in terms of the appeal?
In regard to an appeal, of course, I wasn't in the trial. I was there for a day or two of testimony, but you'd have to order the transcripts and you'd have to see how the case went through and any issues. And in regard to an appeal, I don't know if you're addressing the actual charge. That's not an appealable issue, but there could be some imperfection in the bias intimidation statute that a appellate court could look at.
So you think that if there are imperfections that are found in the bias intimidation statute, that could be a factor making room for a successful appeal?
Well, more of an appeal is how the jury was charged and whether there was incorrect information that came out that shouldn't have come out, or if there was objections that weren't sustained, or certain things that were let in that shouldn't have been let in. So it's really what the legislature is in regard to the actual charge, but there's always a possibility that they could explore that area of the statute in regard to an appellate issue.
So, knowing what you know as far as what he was guilty and not guilty of now, what does this mean for Darun Ravi? Where is this going to put him?
Well, the judge is going to have to sentence him between, if he was found guilty of the second-degree charge. As I said, I just walked out and you handed me the verdict sheet. I wasn't there for the reading of the verdict, but if it's a second-degree offense, the range is 5 to 10 years, and the judge would probably have to sentence him to a 5-year sentence because it's a second degree. If it was third-degree offenses, there would be a presumption of non-incarceration because he has no priors. However, if it was a second degree, there's a range of 5 to 10 years.
And also possible deportation?
As again, I am not an immigration lawyer, and I don't know his immigration status, but the immigration status, of course, would be looked into. It seems to be he has some pending status, but I don't know. If he had pending status, he would have a hearing with the immigration, and they would decide if this is considered what's called an aggravated felony or a crime of moral turpitude. If it is considered one of those, it could be an issue in regard to his immigration status. But as I said, I don't know his immigration status.
Anything else that stood out to you about this trial, or anything that happened that you want to mention, or anything I didn't cover that you think was interesting to bring up?
Well, again, it's social media. A college student in his first month at school, two college students in their first months at school colliding, and then, of course, the sexual orientation issue. So you have three very highly sensitive, emotional times in people's lives all going together. Or basically you have three major things going on at once: social media, the sexual orientation, and both of their boys' first month at school and all the surrounding things that come with that. So I think that's why the world watched it.
And you heard it there, an interesting perspective on what happened in this case, the collision of three different things: the social media factor, these two young men, their first college experience, heading off as 18-year-olds and living with a complete stranger in a dorm, then also dealing with the differences in sexual orientation. Unfortunately, in this case, it's ending in tragedy. Live outside the Middlesex County Courthouse, Christy Duffy, FiOS 1 News. Mike?
All right, Christy, thank you. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to have more on this throughout the day.